All right. Well, if you are watching this video, congratulations to the year three folks because you have made it to the final year of Circus. So that's a huge accomplishment for y'all. And in year three, we're gonna do a presentation on advanced asset liability management and investments. And so your pre-work is going to be focused on the investment side. Okay, because there's a lot that goes into the investments, and I'm well aware that for most of us in the class, we don't have a lot of interaction with the investments. So on the first slide, you guys have my email address. A lot of you have already used it, so keep that handy as we're going along. We'll talk about some of the basic terms to the investments, and then some of the features of what we refer to as fixed income securities. Fixed income investments are bonds, and that's for us in credit unions, whether you're federal chartered or state chartered. That tends to be what we spend a lot of time buying when we're buying investments. And then at the end, I'm also going to walk us through the investment policies and some of the things that should be in there. So that way, when you go get your credit union's investment policy, then you can have an idea as to the permissible investments that you can be in. One of the questions that always comes up is for references. So if somebody really wants to be a chief financial officer, a CFO, or maybe your credit union's large enough where you're going to be a VP of finance. So, what are some references? What are some things that I can do? Some places I can look to learn a little bit more about investments, aside from what we're going to talk about in Circus. And so here on the screen, there's a couple of options that are on the web. So under investment structures and general investment knowledge, if you just highlight those and paste them into your browser, you'll be directed to the article. But then the first bullet point, the gentleman is pretty much considered to be the godfather of fixed income securities. His name is Frank Fabozzi, and Frank Fabozzi wrote a book that's literally entitled The Handbook of Fixed Income Securities. And there's been numerous updates to it over the time, but if over time, but if you want to learn about bonds and different types of bonds, some of which we're going to talk about here today, I would encourage you to get your hands on Frank Fabozzi's book and read that, because there's just a wealth of knowledge in there. So let's get into it. When we talk about fixed income securities, first of all, why do we call them fixed income investments? And the reason that we call them fixed income is because they have an interest rate that's stated, and so that interest rate is what you're going to make interest from. But then there's also other parts to the securities that get factored into it. Premiums and discounts are what we combine with the interest rate to get the yield. So the first thing that I'll mention to you is that rates and yields are two different things. Rates is what we earn in interest. Yield is what we actually are earning on the investment. And the second thing that we need to talk about is that price and yield are inversely related. So here's what that means. When the price of a security goes up, the yield or the return to it or from it is less to you. And intuitively, that kind of makes sense to us, because the more expensive something becomes, the price of something, the more it goes up, the less of a return that we have from that. Maybe if the price of gasoline went up to $7 a gallon, then maybe I'd find I'm not going to fill up my car 3 times a week. maybe I'd figure out something else to do, but the price of that commodity would go up, and so therefore the actual return to me will go down. And then the inverse of that is also true. So if prices come down, now something isn't as expensive, so now the return, the yield to me would actually increase. So whenever we talk about investments, the more expensive a fixed income security becomes, the less of a return there is to me, the holder of that security. So that's just a couple of things that are the basics of this. And then when it comes to calculating yield, these I'll give you a couple of really straightforward examples. So as you can see here on the screen, the coupon is 4%. The coupon is the rate. And so that's how much interest we would make on the security. Now, if we were selling the security, or maybe we were buying, somebody was selling the security to us at $900. So that's going to be what we're buying it for. That's the price in essence. And keep in mind that on fixed income securities, when the maturity comes up, or the investment goes away, maybe it gets called, or the investment matures, you're going to get back what's referred to as par. And par is 100 cents on the dollar. So in this example that I have here on the screen, the par value is 1,000. So if I can buy the security for $900, and I'm going to get back 1,000 when it matures, that's something that I get to recognize as income because I bought it at a discount. So when you buy a security at a discount, that's additional income to you, the bondholder. So I'm going to make the interest, that's the 4%. And then I'm also going to take that $100, the difference between the 900 that I'm buying it for and the 1,000 that I'm going to get when it matures, and I'm going to incrementally build in that income over time. And so if I want to know, well, what's that actual return going to be to me, the yield? I can figure out the interest. So just take the par value, the $1,000 times 0.04, which is the 4% coupon. So that means I'm going to make $40 in interest a year. Well, if I take the $40 in interest and I divide into that the 900 that I'm buying the security for, the actual return to me is 4.44%. So even though the rate is 4, I'm actually earning 4.44%. That's the yield to me. And the reason that the yield is higher than the stated rate, the coupon rate, is because of that additional income that I'm going to recognize over time. So that's how a discount would work. And when we're talking about investments, when we get together for the year 3 presentation at Circus, just keep in mind that a discount, if I buy something at a discount, that's additional income to me. Now, the inverse of that is also true, which is if I don't buy something at a discount, I got to buy it at a premium. Now, there are some investments that I can buy at par. But if you buy an investment at par, usually that's an investment that's just been issued. So just been issued today or yesterday, whatever the case may be. In other words, it hasn't been on the secondary market. So where we buy most of our securities is on the secondary market. And so in this example, this is what a premium looks like. So same interest rate, 4%. I'm still going to get back $1,000 when it matures. That's the par value. But now I'm going to pay $1,100 for that. And when I do that, I go through the same calculations. So I can still calculate my interest, $40, and then I divide what I'm borrowing or what I'm buying it for, $1,100, into that $40. And that tells me that the yield is 3.64%. And always keep in the back of our minds that the yield is going to match or be very comparable to where interest rates are today. So when I'm looking to buy securities or sell securities, that yield that gets calculated, that's really the spot rate in the market. The spot rate is what is an interest rate right now. And so that yield, so even though the interest on it is 4%, the fact that the yield's 3.64% would be an indication that current market rates are probably very close to that. That's why if I'm going to sell an investment that's got a 4% rate to it into an environment where everybody else is getting 3.64% or something comparable to that, well, people are going to be willing to pay me more than the par value. So premiums are an expense. So I have to take that extra $100 here, and I would have to recognize that expense over time against the interest that I'm earning. That's how I get the yield of 3.64. A discount is income. And it's very important when you're buying investments that you understand just that basic premise. Because if your credit union buys a lot of securities that have premiums, then that can be an expense that can add up pretty quick over time. So price, yield are inversely related. If price goes up, yield goes down. If price goes down, the yield goes up. And hopefully these examples were able to give you some insight into that. Now, when we get into the investment side of things, so it's always important buying a security, buying an investment. That's just a tactical decision. I have money to invest today. I have 250,000. I have 1 million. I have 5 million. I have 10 million. Whatever the size of the investments are that you buy at your credit union, that's a tactical decision. And we also have to keep in mind the bigger picture of the investment portfolio, because at the end of the day, it can sound really fun to talk about investments. Investment folks tend to have their own lingo to things, but yet at the end of the day, the investment portfolio for us in credit unions, it's there to meet the liquidity risk of the credit union. In other words, the investment portfolio is truly there to meet day-to-day operations of the credit union of cash. And then if there's investment outflows, I need to be able to make sure that we can give the members their money back. And the best place to come get that can be the investment portfolio. And so we need to understand the cash flows of the institution. So when we get into the cash flows, we want to combine both the deposit side and the loan side. And this is a very simplified example of what this is going to look like for us. So on the top line, you can see where it says old money for the loan portfolio. Now across the top are different time periods, but that's basically 1 year into the future. That's how far out we're looking. So old money is existing loans that we have where payments are coming back to us. And one of the things that we can do is every day inside of your credit union, when those payments come back, they get aggregated and they get combined together. And we can use those as a funding source for more loans today. And so that old money, those are contractual payments that are supposed to come back. Those are also prepayments that could come back. And the prepayments can come in two forms. One, if the contractual payment on a car loan is $400 and somebody sends me $500, well, that extra $100, that's a prepayment. The second form of a prepayment is when somebody pays off the loan. So when they pay off the loan, we get all of our cash back. And so those are the two forms of prepayments that we have. And that's what you see on the old money line. How fast would the loans come back to us, or how much would we get back in contractual payments and prepayments? Now the line right below that, new money, So those would be loans that we're going to fund. Those would be loans that are going out the door. So when you look at old money all the way over to the right, you can see that we're getting back 1.2 million. But then in new money, new loans, if I round that up, we're making 1.4 million in new loans. So I don't have enough money coming back from the existing loan portfolio to cover the new loans that we're going to make over the next 12 months. So I've got a net cash outflow. In other words, if that's how it happens on our balance sheet, I'm going to have to find that money somewhere. And so right now I've got a net cash outflow of $165,000 that I got to find somewhere. So maybe one of the places I can find that is on the deposit side. So on the line that you see, where it says the balances of the deposits, when deposits come in to the institution, for every credit union, the primary funding source for loans is member deposits. The primary funding source for loans is member deposits. And so what do we see here at Tim Gardner Federal Credit Union? Over the next 12 months, our deposits are going to start, or they're starting at $4,854,745. Well, 12 months from now, we're projecting that our balance is going to be $4,500,000. So now I've got a net cash outflow on the deposit side as well. So I've got more cash needed on the loan side. I've got more cash needed on the deposit side. So right now in this simplistic example, we would have to find $520,455 somewhere if this is how things were playing out on our balance sheet. And so where would we go to find that? A lot of us are going to go to the investment portfolio. We could borrow money for sure, but for a lot of us, we're going to go to the investment portfolio. And in the investment portfolio is where we find cash and or overnight investments. Now, from a technical standpoint, there is a difference between cash and overnight funds. Cash, I don't make any money on. Cash is what I find in my vault, in my ATMs, my teller drawers, those sorts of things. So we don't make any money on that. When you see something listed as overnight funds, that has an interest rate attached to it. So we can make money by having our cash at our corporate credit union or a bank or something like that. So there is a difference between cash and overnight funds, but I tend to use the terms interchangeably. To me, it's just liquid money. Okay, if I need cash, if I need to fund day-to-day operations, if I need to fund loan growth, if I need to fund deposit outflows, I'm going to come here to find it. And generally speaking, 10 to 20% of the total investment portfolio would be in liquid funds. So that's a very general number for each credit union. It could be different. But there's also some other things that I could do. So maybe I don't want to leave all my money in cash. So one of the things that I could do is I could have some money sitting in cash, but then I could also use what's called a laddering strategy. And a laddering strategy means that every month I'm going to have a certain amount of investments that are going to mature. And when they mature, if I have a month or a quarter or a year, like you saw on that cash flow report, where I need additional money, then when that investment matures, that's cash that's coming back to the credit union from the maturity. So maybe we can use it for that. And here's what a ladder looks like. So as you can see, we got $35 million in the portfolio. We got $6 million in overnight funds. Again, that's liquid cash. So each month we're going to have $1 million that's going to mature. Now, when that $1 million matures in the ladder, and one of the things I want to mention about the investments that you put in a ladder, the investments that you put in a ladder would be what we refer to as bullets. Bullet investment means that if I buy it at a certain date, it's going to go straight through to the maturity date. There's no chance for it to be called away. There's no chance for it to prepay. The best example that we're all probably very familiar with is certificates of deposit. So think of in my ladder, or in the credit union's ladder, I'm going to have CDs in there. So that way I know every month there's going to be $1 million maturing. Now, if I need the million, like we saw in the cash flow report, I can use that. If I don't need the million, then I call up my investment broker and I ask them, what option do we have to invest $1 million that's going to mature 12 months from now with no optionality in it? In other words, it's a bullet. And whatever the interest rate is probably going to be a little bit more than what you would make by letting the money sit in cash. So it's a way where we can earn a little bit more money, maybe not a lot, but a little bit more money, but also help us manage the cash flows of the institution. So what's in cash or overnight funds, the laddering strategy, those are great things that we can use. There's also other things that you could look at to understand the cash that's coming into the credit union, or when is it coming in. This is an example here of if you buy investments that are amortizing, and an amortizing investment looks a lot like a loan. So the best example is mortgage-backed securities. So there's securities that are backed by home loans in different parts of the United States. And when I have amortizing securities every month, I get back principal and interest. And so this would be an example of, if you have amortizing investments in a different part of your investment portfolio, then you know that each month I'm going to have some money coming back. It's going to change from month to month, but I got a rough idea that I'm going to get back $1.5 million or 2 million, 500,000, whatever the number might be. So you can have amortizing securities as well that can also help with the cash flows of the institution. And then there's this. So each day there's 4 ACH files that come into every credit union. They're called the A, the B, the C, and the D file. And when those A, B, C, and D files come in, there's debits and credits. There's cash coming in and there's cash going out. So the best example of what we find in ACH files is direct deposits, and month end numbers such as Social Security payments and those sorts of things. So when I'm looking at the ACH files, I can have I can develop a very deep understanding as to what goes on inside of my credit union. When do those payroll files come in? Which weeks did they come in? How much is usually in those payroll files? And then I can also look at, well, where's the cash that's going out of the institution through an ACH file? Where's it going? So you can really get into a lot of granular detail. And as you can see here on the spreadsheet that I have, I have the debits and the credits for all 4 of the ACH files, and then I net them out. And so it just gives me an idea on what am I looking at. So when you see the red numbers, so that's a net cash outflow to the institutions. The black numbers are weeks where we had a net cash inflow. And it doesn't take very long to figure out that most of the net cash inflow is when the payroll files come in. So you can also start to become in tune with the ACH files, because that's a wealth of information for us. But all those things, that's what helps us understand the cash coming in and the cash going out of the institution. And once you have a handle on that, once you have an idea as to what happens inside of your credit union, well, then we can get into conversations around, well, now I have extra money. At the end of the day, I'd love to loan it out, but for some reason, we haven't been able to loan it out. So let's go buy an investment. But again, you wouldn't start thinking about this until after you've got the day-to-day cash covered, you got an understanding of the cash flows. Maybe I'm employing a laddering strategy. Maybe I'm just aware of how much cash comes in and goes out. It might be able to help me meet the cash flow needs of the institution. Once we get there, now we start talking about what type of investments do we really want to be in. And that's where you get into mortgage-backed securities. That's where you get into callable investments. In other words, we're going to talk about investments that have optionality in them. And the reason, whenever there's an option, then there's usually a higher rate of return than there is on a bullet. So if I take a certificate of deposit, which is an example of a bullet, and I compare that to a callable investment. So a callable investment is the entity that issues it has the ability to call that investment away before it matures. Well, if you're going to entice me as an investor to take on that risk of the investment being called away, well, you have to entice me to do that. How do you do that? You tend to offer higher rates. And the risk to us as an institution is the investment's going to be called away when interest rates are coming down, because the entity that issued the security, that's the rate is their servicing cost, basically. So if they can lower their servicing cost by calling it away and then simply reissuing the investment at a lower rate, they're going to do that all day long. And so if you're going to entice me as an investor to take on that optionality, then there's got to be a reason to do that. And that usually comes down to the rate. But like you see here on the screen in that second bullet point, embedded options in investments is something that you have to understand. You absolutely have to understand what are the options, how do I manage those options, and then from a balance sheet management perspective, I need to be able to look at the options that are in my investments compared to the options that are in my loans. What's the number one option in loans? Prepayments. The members can prepay the loan whenever they want to. And when are they going to prepay the loan? When it's advantageous to them, which would be a declining rate environment, or when it's advantageous to the credit union, which would be a rising rate environment. Yeah, I mean, they're gonna refi their loans, refi their mortgage loans, is the best example when interest rates come down. And so for us inside the credit union, as soon as somebody refinances a first mortgage, even if we hold on to the mortgage, our loan balances haven't changed, but now our interest income has gone down. And so that's an option that the members have. They can exercise that option whenever they want to. So when we think about what investments are we buying, we also then need to look at, well, how does that fit into the loans that we have? And I'll give you an example. So even though we're just learning about investments, if you have real estate loans, let's hypothesize that at Gardner Federal Credit Union, the only loans we make are real estate loans. That's it. 30-year fixed real estate loans, to be precise. So the entire loan portfolio is real estate loans. So therefore, when we buy investments, we don't want to buy mortgage-backed securities because those are backed by real estate loans. We want to diversify our risk. So what do? We buy callable investments. Okay. So I got real estate loans, and now I've got callable investments. It doesn't seem like those two instruments are correlated whatsoever. One's a real estate loan, one's a callable investment. And yet, one of the things that you have to understand around balance sheet management is, even though in this example, those two instruments don't seem to have any correlation whatsoever, they have a very close correlation on what they do when interest rates change. Because when interest rates come down, the members are going to refinance the mortgages at some point, right? And then when interest rates come down, those callable investments are going to get called away. So now I have instruments that don't seem to be correlated, but yet they react the exact same way. When interest rates come down, we're going to get all that cash back. When interest rates go up, the real estate loans are going to extend out further because there's less of an incentive for somebody to prepay their mortgage, and the callable investments are going to extend all the way to maturity. So now I have to wait on those. But that optionality, that's truly where balance sheet management becomes a lot more of an art than a science, because there's a lot going on with that. And so when we get to the long end of the investments, those are just some of the things to think about, to stay away from. Now let's get into the types of fixed income securities. So this is where we're going to talk about some of the different types of investments that are out there. And when we do that, so some of this we've already addressed, but just be aware that when somebody is talking in terms of basis points, 100 basis points is a different way of describing 1%. And talking in terms of basis points makes it easier when I'm not describing whole numbers. Okay, so if the rate on an investment was 0.97, well, if I'm not saying 97 basis points, it's a little bit clunkier to talk about it. So basis points is just a different way of describing the interest rate. But when we're using basis points, what somebody says is 3 numbers. So 100 basis points is 1%, or 435 basis points is 4.3%. And then obviously if they're giving you 2, then that's less than 1%. 96 basis points is 0.96. So be aware of that on basis points. And then we also have the rate, the coupon rate. That's what the interest payments are going to be. And then we also have premiums and discounts. Okay, so we talked about those in the beginning, but those are terms that I want to reinforce to us here. Then we also have what's the maturity date? That's the date that the bond's going to pay off. That's the day that we get our cash back for us. And then the yield is what we're actually making. Okay, so just some things to think about. This is another slide where we get into the difference between premiums and discounts and what that really means. Again, a discount is additional. If I buy an investment at a discount, that's additional income. If I buy a security at a premium, that's an additional expense. Okay, so here's some of the different types of investments. Again, I just want you to be familiar with these. We're gonna go over these when we're together at Circus again, but I do want you to be familiar with some of the terminology. So there are U.S. Treasuries. U.S. Treasuries are those that are issued by the United States government. And treasuries can go anywhere from 1 year all the way out to 30 years. And when you buy a U.S. Treasury, they tend to be the lowest rate in the marketplace. They're an example of a bullet, but that's because they're also considered to be the risk-free rate in the marketplace, because there's the belief that the United States government is always going to pay its debt, which is what the treasuries are. And then we get into agencies. Now, agencies are investments that are issued by federal government agencies. So examples of federal agencies could be Fannie Mae, it could be Freddie Mac, it could be examples of things such as the Federal Home Loan Bank, the FHLB. There's also the FFCB, which is the Federal Farm Credit Bureau. So those are all federal government agencies that issue securities. That's how they fund a lot of their operations. They list different types of investments that they can sell. So they can issue bullets if they want to. They can issue callable investments. And again, a callable investment is something that's going to be redeemed, the potential for it to be redeemed before it matures. And also keep in mind, I don't have it in the slides here, but an important point on callable investments is there are different call dates in different, or call frequencies in different callable investments. So there are some callable investments, maybe they can only be called one time. So on a specified date in the future, here's the call date. If they don't call it on that date, then it's going to go all the way to maturity. There are call options where it might come up every quarter for a call. It might be a continuous call. So after a certain point in time, every day, that federal agency could call away that investment. So just know that on a callable investment, there's a lot that goes into it. And then there's also mortgage-backed securities. And mortgage-backed securities are issued by three federal agencies: Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and Ginnie Mae. And what those entities do is they purchase real estate loans, entities that originate mortgage loans, and then they sell them into the secondary marketplace. They're selling them a lot of times to Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, or Ginnie Mae. And those entities then take those real estate loans and they put them together and they issue securities that are backed by those real estate loans. And when we talk about mortgage-backed securities, just know that there's two types. There's pass-throughs. Pass-throughs are mortgage-backed securities that act a lot like a loan. As payments come in, then the payments are distributed to the holders of the bonds. So it could be contractual payments, maybe it's prepayments that come in. Whatever comes in just gets passed through directly to whoever's holding that security. So again, it acts a lot like a real estate loan. A collateralized mortgage obligation, a CMO, is a good example of what is referred to in the investment world as a structured product. And a structured product is one where what we're structuring are the prepayments. In other words, we're sending the prepayments to certain bondholders at certain times. And so what makes a CMO, a collateralized mortgage obligation, a little bit more beneficial to some institutions is they have a better idea on how long the investment's going to be around. A pass-through, because that acts like a loan, you really don't know. It just depends on whenever the payments and the prepayments come in. So pass-throughs, CMOs are the two types of mortgage-backed securities. And when we get into mortgage-backed securities, there's also prepayments that are factored in. So there's very sophisticated prepayment models that are out there. And there's two different ways that you can talk about a prepayment model. You can talk about it in terms of a CPR, which is a constant prepayment rate. And then there's also prepayment tables that are stated as PSA speeds. PSA speeds are just the Public Securities Association. So it's just a different entity that comes up with the prepayment tables. And all it means is there's just different ways to talk about how these real estate loans that back these securities are going to prepay. And there are assumptions. So just be aware that when we look at it, there's different ways to talk about prepayment tables, prepayment speeds. And inside of the world of CMOs, collateralized mortgage obligations, there are sequential pay CMOs, and then there's planned amortization class PAC CMOs. And for a CMO, think in terms of a bucket. So in the investment world, the lingo is tranches. So for us in credit unions, when we think of, let's say that a CMO has three buckets, so three tranches. So for us in credit unions, we tend to buy the forward tranches. So we want CMOs that are going to, be around 3 years, 4 years, maybe 5 years. There are entities that want the buckets or the tranches that go a lot further out into the future. Insurance companies would be a good example of that. But on these, I have these three buckets, and now because the CMO is a structured product, the prepayments get structured. They get sequenced to go to certain buckets. So that's why on a sequential pay CMO, which is where the name comes from, all the prepayments that come in on all the mortgages, all of the prepayments get sequenced to the forward tranche or the first bucket, bondholders like us and credit unions. So all the prepayments get sequenced there until that bucket or that tranche is paid off. And then the prepayments that are coming in would be sequenced to the second bucket or the second tranche. And so on a sequential pay CMO, it just means that all the prepayments get sequenced to a certain tranche. Now that's different than a planned amortization class. So same example, I got 3 tranches, 3 buckets. But now on that forward tranche, as well as the other 2 tranches, now there's a level. So even though all the prepayments are getting sequenced into that forward tranche, that first bucket, they're only going to get sequenced there until they hit a certain level. So the investment hasn't paid off, but once they hit the level, now all of a sudden the prepayments get sequenced to the second tranche, the second bucket, until they hit that band that's in there. And so a planned amortization class, a PAC CMO, is the best way to target. Look, if I want to know an investment is going to be around for roughly 4 years, if I can buy a PAC CMO as an example, that's going to give me the best opportunity to be in a security that's giving me a little bit higher rate than a bullet or a callable, but I still got a pretty good idea on how long it's going to be around. So sequential pay CMOs, PAC CMOs are just 2 different types of CMOs that we see a lot of in the credit union space. We're gonna go over these a lot more in class, but I do want you to at least see what a Bloomberg screenshot looks like. A Bloomberg box, a Bloomberg system is what every investment firm uses as a way to communicate to prospective buyers or sellers of securities. Here's what this particular security would be worth. So when you see this one up here, this is a callable security. So you can see I've got some different things that I want you to be familiar with. The rate, the coupon rate at issue of this particular security. So as you can see, it's a FFCB, which is the Federal Farm Credit Bank, and the rate is 1.4%. Now that can be important to us because if the rate's 1.4, well, that gives me an idea how low would rates have to go before this one might get called away. So that's what that rate means. Then I've got the call structure right there in the middle of the screen. It can be called anytime, starting on a specific date. So after that date, then it can be called every single day. Okay. So, and then what's the actual maturity? So if it doesn't get called away at all, then when's it going to mature? And so just become familiar with that. And on this screen, you can see that there is a yield to maturity. So in this case, it's 4.38%. But if it gets called away, then my yield, where it says yield to next call, it goes a lot higher. Why? Because up here on this line where it says price, the price is 86.30. So I'm buying this at a discount. In the investment world, I would say that I'm buying this at a deep discount. So if this investment got called away, all that additional income that's sitting there because I'm going to buy it at a discount, I get to recognize that immediately if it gets called away. That's why you can see the yield spikes on that yield to next call. So again, just become familiar with it. Listen to this recording a few times. Look at the screenshot. Pause it. Whatever you need to do. Again, we're going to go over more of these in class. But then there's also, what does a screenshot for a mortgage-backed security look like? And just some of the things real quick about this. So you can tell by looking at the line that says traits whether or not it's a pass-through or a CMO. And again, if it's a CMO, that means it's a structured product. If it's a pass-through, that means it's going to act a lot like a mortgage. I can also see what is the maturity of this the security that I have, and then in the upper right-hand corner, you can see where did the real estate loans come from? What states did they come from? This is a great example of, you always want to try to have geographical dispersion. I don't want to buy securities where all of the real estate. I don't want to buy mortgage-backed securities where all of the real estate comes from California per se, or Texas. There are instances where I might buy mortgage-backed security where 100% of the collateral comes from a state like New York. The reason that New York tends to be separated is because there's a very steep fee that you have to pay to refinance a real estate loan in New York. And so the prepayments for New York tend to be a lot different. So you would see New York would be separated. So there are securities where it's 100% New York, but that's because that has a very unique characteristic. For most states, Georgia, Florida, Texas, California, Michigan, there's similar characteristics, so therefore they just put them all together. But then, down here on the line where it says 97.0-05.05, that tells us there's the price. So again, this is a discount. And then when you move to the right, you can see that the one that's highlighted, the 5.46, that's the yield in the 0 basis point environment. So if interest rates don't change, that's what the yield's going to be. But then when I drop down below that, the average life of this security would be 8.65 years. Okay, 8.65 years. And then when interest rates change, so if interest rates go up, so that's, if we come back here to the left, so the yield in that particular rate environment would be 5.39. In a plus 300 basis point environment, the average life on that would be 11.16 years. So I would have extension risk. The reason the yield would be lower is because now I would have to wait longer to recognize that discount. Okay, so again, there's a lot going on here. Just familiarize yourself with some of this. We're going to go over a lot of examples of this in class, and then we'll have different discussions about what does this mean? Is this an investment that we should buy? Those sorts of things. Okay, and lastly, we get to investment policies. So the purpose of the investment policy, it doesn't really matter which credit union's investment policy you look at. The purpose is to meet the day-to-day cash flow operations of the credit union. That's what the investment area is designed to do. So when you see the purpose, your credit union is going to have it stated, maybe using different words, but at the end of the day, that's what it's going to come down to. There is a part from the NCUA, and it's called, it's referred to differently, but Part 703, Reg 703. Reg 703 is basically where we go to find what are considered to be permissible investments for credit unions. So if you're going to be involved in purchasing investments, managing investments for your credit union, I would encourage you to become very, very familiar with Reg 703, and you can use that as somewhat of a guide to what should my investment policy say or not say. So Part 703, Reg 703, definitely something that you want to be familiar with. When we read investment policies, like everything else that we do in credit unions, the ultimate responsibility lies with the board of directors. And so this is where, the board or whoever writes the investment policy is going to state the objectives. They're going to state what are the levels of risk that we're comfortable taking on. What do we want to have targets for the return /yield of the portfolio? Those might all be things that you would find in your investment policy, you will definitely see in your investment policy what are the types of investments that we're comfortable investing in. And if an investment's not listed in your investment policy, then you can't buy it. To give you a quick example, so I talked about mortgage-backed securities that are backed by residential mortgages. There are also mortgage-backed securities that are backed by commercial real estate loans. Those are two different types of investments, two different types of risks that you need to be able to analyze and understand, and those sorts of things. So if your investment policy doesn't say that you can buy commercial mortgage-backed securities, then you're not going to go out and buy one. Same way if it doesn't say we can invest in securities that have a 10-year maturity. If that's not spelled out, then you can't buy a bullet that's going to mature 10 years from now, as an example. So just different types of risks that we have there, and then you get into the characteristics of the different types of investments that are out there. This can be very important, especially if you're going to buy mortgage-backed securities, because if you're going to purchase mortgage-backed securities, you need to state what the goal is for the average life. So like I showed you on that screenshot, the average life in the 0 basis point environment was 8.65 years. So maybe your policy would say, on average, the credit union would like to purchase a security that has an average life of 5 years or less, or 8 years or less, or 6 years or less, whatever it is. But that's going to be the guide to tell us what kind of securities are we going to be comfortable purchasing. So that's what the characteristics are going to do. And then you're going to get into the different types of investments. So I mentioned the federal agencies as an example, but even though these are federal agencies, you would still list them all out. We can buy securities that are issued by Fannie Mae, which is the FNMA, or Freddie Mac, which is the FHLMC. If you want to buy a security from a federal agency and you don't have it listed in your investment policy, such as maybe it's the Federal Farm Credit Bank, the FFCB, if you want to buy securities from any government agency, I would encourage you to list them all in your investment policy. And you can even buy some state chartered credit unions, not federally chartered credit unions, some state chartered credit unions, and it's different by every state. They can buy corporate bonds. So these are bonds that are issued by companies. So that's a different type of risk, because now you have to analyze credit risk as well. So, but if you're going to buy corporate bonds, you would want to have that stated in your investment policy. And then, what are the different types of risks that we're willing to take on? Liquidity risk, that's the primary risk that we're trying to address through the investment portfolio. And for a lot of us in credit unions, when we buy securities, when we buy mortgage-backed securities, the primary risk that we're taking on is interest rate risk. There's not a lot of credit unions that take on credit risk in their investment portfolio. However, with that being said, when you buy a CD, a certificate of deposit, whether it's issued by another credit union or a bank, even if it's secured or even if it's insured up to the $250,000 that's there, you still want to make sure that you're outlining that we understand to some extent we're taking on credit risk. Okay. And then here's what we might do to manage that. And you definitely want to be in tune to concentration risk. So we don't want to have too many securities that are in one type. I don't need to have 100% of my investment portfolio in mortgage-backed securities. Same way I don't need 100% in callable investments, right? It doesn't matter what the risk is. The best way to manage risk is diversify, diversify, diversify. So I do have some bullets. I do have some callable investments. I do have some mortgage-backed securities. So I'm diversifying the different types of risk that we have for the institution. And then your policy is also going to state that we, the board of directors, realize that we have ultimate responsibility for the investment portfolio, but we're giving that to somebody on the management team, i.e., the CEO, the CFO, or whatever the case may be. So those are just some of the things that you're going to find in the investment portfolio before you come to class. I would encourage you to get your investment portfolio and read it for your credit union. Some investment portfolios are going to be, or investment policies are going to be longer than others, but take the time to get that, read that, become familiar with what we might be able to do and not do at our credit union before you come to class. And with that, that's kind of what we have to talk about for the pre-work. Again, in the policies, it's going to come down to the board of directors, and they have to ensure that everything that's going on in the credit union is up to the standard of the regulations, and those sorts of things. And at some point, the board of directors, I mean, they could very well need to demonstrate that they have a knowledge of the types of investments that the credit union is going to be in. And that's where somebody like yourself, who's watching this, you might be the person that needs to educate the board of directors on the different types of investments, or what is our investment strategy, or what is the characteristics of our overall investment portfolio at the credit union. So that's what we got for the pre-work. On the first slide, you guys have my contact information. So if you got any questions, hit me up, Tim Gardner 1125 at hotmail.com. Call me on my cell phone. And if I don't hear from you, I'll see you real soon in Athens, Georgia. Thanks so much. Have a good day.